You've been up since dark 30 and sunrise was a while ago. You've gone 200 miles already and earned a stop to stretch your legs and fuel up. Welcome to 200 Miles Before Breakfast, a podcast by, for, and about the members of the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America. This is episode 52, released on the 14th of March, 2022. Our guest is René Steenvoorden, member since last week. We've got another twofer for you here with episodes 51 and 52. Back in 51, we soothed your soul with brewmaster Jason Oliver. Here in 52, we're going to get you going again with coffee entrepreneur René Steenvoorden. Check them both out. And if you know an MOA member with a really cool job, let us know about them by dropping us an email introduction to podcast@bmwmoa.org. And be sure to come back for episode 53 when we talk to another MOA member with a really cool job. Especially for you music folks, you're going to really enjoy episode 53. Sometimes fewer words are better, especially when the subject matter speaks for itself. Such is the case with the MOA Foundation's latest creation. It is completely custom, simply stunning, and it can be all yours. But you can't win if you don't enter, and time is limited. Tickets for the completely custom fundraiser are on sale through May 9th, 2022. The winner will be announced live on May 21st. You do not have to be present to win, but you must purchase a ticket to be included in the drawing. Tickets are $25 each, or you get 5 for $100. All proceeds from the event benefit the rider safety, education, and training initiatives of the BMW MOA Foundation. You can find out more about the foundation and about the bike involved in the completely custom fundraiser on the foundation's website at bmwmoaf.org. Click on the Completely Classic link, and good luck. Joining me today is René Steenvoorden. We're going to talk about why René is on the show in a bit. So, René, thanks for joining us here on the podcast, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, Wes. Yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah, cool. Now I'm gonna keep it a surprise for a little while longer. You're not quite a household name yet. You've got some work to do to achieve that status. So I'll drop it on people in a minute. Although if they've read the description of the show, they already know. Sometimes subscribers just get the title, so they don't know yet. But tell me a little bit about your motorcycle journey. I'm curious, always curious, how people got into motorcycling. So tell me a little bit about how you discovered motorcycles and where your motorcycling journey is in your life right now.
Yeah, for sure. So it's actually an interesting story because I did not grow up riding motorcycles at all. I grew up riding bicycles all of my life. I grew up in the Netherlands, actually. So, everybody has 5 bikes. And
is that like a national stereotype? I haven't heard that one. I used to live in Belgium. I never really spent any time in the Netherlands, so I'm not quite as familiar.
I think it's about that number. Yeah. People have a lot of bikes and they're very disposable usually too. So they lose a bike, it's stolen, they get another one, and it's just a commodity, right? So bicycles was a thing for me, but I moved to the US in 2015, and I think probably the biggest reason for me to start riding is because it was so easy to get your endorsement here. Yeah. Like in Europe, you take classes for months. They cost a lot of money. You go with an instructor. You pay by the hour. The exams are very, very tough. The requirements are very high. So I think I just realized that I can get my license in a couple of days here. It's like, why not? I know how to ride something on 2 wheels. How hard can it be if you add an engine to it? So I did that, and I lived in Denver at the time and did the MSF class, had my endorsement, and bought a 2008 Triumph Scrambler. Cool. Basically a cool looking kind of city-ish, off-road-ish bike to just ride around town. And I was very focused on just getting out on the thing and getting experience. But I've also felt kind of limited by the bike because it's carbureted. I took it up to the mountains, which is like an hour away, took up an elevation, and I stopped running basically halfway to the mountain pass. And I had no idea why. Realizing that it was a carbureted bike and not having a lot of knowledge about the mechanics. So what happened was I drove back down. I was like, this bike is broken. I don't know what to do about it. It doesn't have gas or something. And, learned a lot from that little journey. So after a couple of years riding it around town and moving actually to the mountains and starting to live at 10,000 feet, I realized that I needed a better bike if I wanted to go a little bit further and in worse mountain conditions.
Yeah.
And I bought a Triumph Scrambler 1200. So basically a completely redesigned naked adventure bike from Triumph.
Yes, and
absolute blast.
Much more importantly, it was fuel injected.
Yes, exactly. No loss of power anywhere you go. It was amazing. So yeah, I do a lot of mountain riding and did that for a while, and actually just recently upgraded to a BMW F850 GS because everybody told me about the comfort, and I did some very long trips last season, and I realized that the Scrambler is fantastic to ride, but it does have limitations in terms of luggage capacity, overall comfort. There's no windscreen. Yeah. I felt like it was not great for, going across the country. And so far the BMW has been mainly parked in my garage because it is very wintry up here right now, but I'm ready to get out.
Yeah. When does it start snowing in the Denver area? Probably October, maybe?
Yeah, it really depends on where you are. So we are an hour west of Denver. At 10,000 feet, and Denver's at like 5,200. So there's a huge difference there. We get snow in, the early storms in October here and there. You can still ride until usually the end of November, just not on certain days when it's very cold and wet. But the real snow really gets here in like December. The problem is it doesn't go away until May or June.
Right.
So that's our biggest problem. Getting off the road, on snow and ice is no fun. So that's the only drawback.
Yeah. And I imagine because of the elevation, once it comes, it doesn't really melt off as quickly as other places either.
Yeah, you're 100% right. It doesn't really melt. We get a lot of crazy wind as well, so the snow moves around, fills in the driveway. It's not as fantastic if you have to encounter it every day, but in general, I really enjoy living up here. It's great fun. A lot of adventuring.
Good. So tell me a little bit about your trip last year. So this is for whoever's listening to this, whenever we're talking here in early March of 2022. So you went on this trip in the summer of 21, correct?
Yep. So it was late summer last year. I wanted to take the bike out on a proper trip. I've done a lot of camping in my life and things like that, but not really with a motorcycle. And because I was on the Scrambler at the time, I was very limited with what I could bring. So I saw it as a great challenge to go up to the Overland Expo in Flagstaff and only take what I could bring, really. So I only had a small duffel bag and an 18-liter backpack, and rode it all the way to Flagstaff, camping along the way. So not making super long miles, but basically planning in advance, some camping in national parks along the way, and taking a couple days to get there. And it was great because I think just being forced to go in such a simplistic way is actually very, very exciting. I thought it was a great challenge. Would I have preferred to take a little bit more? Yes. I think the BMW would be a better companion, but it was an amazing trip.
Well, that's awesome. So I'm also curious about what brought you from the Netherlands to the United States. That's a big move to, uproot yourself and move across an ocean and set up life in the middle of a new country.
Absolutely. Yeah. In short, it was my wife. So we met in 2011 in Amsterdam. Yeah. It's always the same story, isn't it?
Often.
Often. Yep. We met working at the same company for a period of 6 to 8 months in Amsterdam in 2011. We both lived in London after that for 4 years together, very career focused. And basically that was a good way for us to live in the same place. We were able to get jobs there. And the funny thing is, when my now wife met me at the time in Amsterdam, she asked me, what do you like to do? And I said, I like to go climbing. I drove a Jeep Cherokee. And she basically was like, well, you live in Holland. Like it's the flattest country on earth. And
just
there's
about.
like, why do you go climbing and drive a Jeep with these gas prices? I was like, because I like the outdoors. I like to, travel and adventure and climb mountains. So it was a very natural fit to, after a couple of years in London, think about where to go. She had already lived in Denver for quite some time, and still had a house there. And we went through the immigration process, which took about 2 years, and then we're able to move in 15. And we took some time off to travel, and I think I discovered the U.S. and specifically Colorado.
Yeah, awesome. Do you still ride bicycles? What's that like at 10,000 feet?
I do, not as often, I must say. It's the one thing I definitely miss. I mean, some things go together really well. I think living on a mountain pass at 10,000 feet and taking a bicycle is only fun if you go downhill. So I definitely have done that before, and I throw it in the car on the way back if a friend or anybody like that is down the hill. But yeah, I do some mountain biking up here. That's about as far as it gets.
Gotcha. Where in the U.S. do you think you want to go next? Like, what's interesting? So maybe I have a little bit of a unique perspective. I lived in Europe. I'm in the U.S. we call it a military brat. My father was in the U.S. Air Force, and I lived for a good long time in Germany and Belgium. So I've seen a good bit of the different areas that Europe has to offer. So I'm curious, once you get to the United States, where do you want to go?
Well, I think we had a unique opportunity because we thought about this for a long time. I mean, I was always very attracted to the outdoors and wide open spaces. And as you know, those are hard to find in Europe.
Yes.
So I think when we were able to move to the US, we took a year off and we planned for this, and we bought a van and we actually lived in it for a year and traveled all around the US. And it gave me the opportunity to really see places and meet a lot of different people and discover like truly what the US is like, and not just what Colorado is like or some big cities that I had gone to for work before. And it was just amazing to just camp every night. And I think the US is such a unique place where you can do that, and do a lot of backcountry camping and finding dispersed campsites and all these great things that I was never used to. And I must say, like the first month, it just made me nervous. I just thought it was very weird. Like there were no people around sometimes, or there were different people around that I couldn't really align with as a European. So I was like, what is going on in this place? But over time, I realized people are really nice, and it was great to just share beers with people around the campfire in random places in North America.
Yeah, there's not a lot of just random off the side of the road camping available in Europe.
That's right. Yep. You're usually get a spot assigned in a very crowded campground with a lot of services, which is exactly the opposite of what you have here in the US.
Yep. Well, that's cool. What was it kind of now? Okay, sorry. Let me gather my thoughts there for a second. So by doing the van travel when you first got here, that made it so that you didn't have a lot of stuff to put in storage, or you didn't have to sell your wife by then didn't have to sell the house, that kind of thing. So it sounds like a really ideal situation. But what was it like to live in a van for a whole year?
I think it was absolutely great. I mean, I think the best thing about it is not the vehicle necessarily. I think a lot of people kind of get stuck on the vehicle you have. Like, is it better if you have a Sprinter or a smaller van or an RV or anything? I don't think it really matters. I think what I liked the most about this experience was you have to live in a very minimalist way. And I think just only taking your best gear, we definitely didn't bring much. We just didn't have the space. And taking your favorite pieces of gear and literally getting out every day and do things and exploring. I think that simplicity, I think I still like a lot. It was one of the reasons we bought a house in the mountains, because we're trying to stay a little bit closer to the basics of life. As in, like, it's nice if it's warm. If it's cold out, you see the effect, you feel it. And I think when we lived in the van, we had that almost every day. Sometimes it was really warm, sometimes it was really cold, sometimes it snowed, and you experience all these things in a way more direct way. And I think the minimalist, simplistic lifestyle, I think I learned a lot from that. And to this day, it's one of the reasons I'm attracted to motorcycle travel is for that reason. I think you're forced to not bring much. You have to stay very close to your environment and deal with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless you have a Gold Wing, or let's see, what are some of the other big touring bikes? The BMW makes the K1600. Yamaha, I think, has I'm thinking the FJR, and I can't remember if that's Kawasaki or Yamaha, but it's not important. Some of the big Harleys have a lot of storage space on them.
Right.
And I always am kind of amused because I ride a GS as well, which is I have a 1200, which is it's a pretty big bike. But when you get right down to it, if you're going to live off of it for a month or 6 weeks or longer, you really can't take everything, and it's an adjustment.
100%. And what you always hear when you ask people when they're on a trip or when they reflect on a long trip they've done, most people say, I should have packed less stuff.
Yeah.
Right. That's usually the answer. Like, you realize you don't need much. And I think the challenge is that optimization of how you pack and what you bring and the type of gear you have it should be a really fun process. Like, I enjoy it. There's also moments where you realize you didn't bring enough, or you could have done better. You're not super comfortable. And I think that's something you have to accept a little bit. Because I think, especially Americans, I think, come more from a culture where, you guys have big cars, right? You can bring whatever you want if you go car camping. And I think coming from that lifestyle maybe makes it a little bit harder to go to a motorcycle and then say, well, I can only take, like 40 liters of stuff.
Right.
That's not much.
Yeah.
And I think that's easily when you get to the bikes that you could take 100 liters or more, where you might not always need that.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I was, when we moved back to the States, I was a teenager, and I remember being struck at two things that I remember very clearly was how long we could drive without having to stop at a border. We didn't have to. And of course, I lived in Europe before the Schengen agreements that basically, made the core of the kind of the interior of Europe almost a free travel zone, almost, right. Not exactly. But I remember even on a train in the middle of the night, stopping at a border, and police would come on and check your passports and all those kinds of things. But in the U.S., man, you could just go for hours and hours and hours, and there were no borders. And I remember being fascinated with the knowledge that I could use the same money everywhere I went. Of course, I lived in Europe before the euro.
Right.
So some things in Europe have changed since I lived there, but I just remember those two things from, being a later teenager and finally getting to travel around the US, because I didn't pay attention to that stuff when I was little. And we were moving all over to different military bases and things like that. So yeah, I don't know, that memory just kind of popped off in my head just now as you were talking about that. And I was thinking how interesting that must be for somebody who's come to the United States for the first time, especially the no borders thing.
Yeah, it was definitely I remember it being it was a very freeing feeling when we came here, because we had lived in London for 4 years, in central London, and we would do a lot of weekend trips to go hiking in Scotland or Wales, and stay in like Airbnbs, bed and breakfast. And we'd have to rent a car close to our destination, take a train, book a train, reserve the train, all those things. It was all so much work to just get to our destination. And then we came to the US, and we literally got in our car and drove away, and you can drive for 12 hours and see all these different places and just stop for gas. Or it was so relaxing. I think that was a big thing. And just having the space, less people, not the crowd. And now I miss the train travel, of course, because now I'm gone. I'm like, oh, that was great. It was kind of cool to be on the train, for a couple hours, but I wouldn't trade it though.
Yeah. So I am curious. I know you said, you didn't get caught up in the hype around living in the van, but I am curious what kind of van you had. And I know that's not what we came to talk about. We came to talk about something else, but I'm very curious about the whole concept of, living in a van. So I want to ask you some questions about that. So tell me a little bit about your van.
So this was, we had a Sprinter van that was converted. It was the short Sprinter. So it's 19 feet. And at the time, this is 2015, the Sprinters hadn't taken off like they're today. There were not many companies that converted them at the time. So this was converted by a company called Road Trek out of Canada, which is traditionally an RV maker. So the inside wasn't like the super cool ones you see these days at the Overland Expo with sliding garages and LED lights on, light bars and huge tires. It was a fairly normal vehicle, but it was really well done. And it was a newer model. So it did have all the modern amenities, but inside it was still very much an RV, just like a very small and very nice RV. And again, it's kind of all you need. You realize that, again, you don't need that much. I think there's a lot of cool stuff out there. And I think if you use it, I think it's amazing, but you don't need that much if you live in a van.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, if anything, what was something that you missed while you were living in the van?
Probably regular showers.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Cause a full-size RV, one of those things that looks like a giant, converted bus. I know some of those have showers in them, but the van-sized ones, there's just more important things to have than a regular shower.
Right. I think storage space was pretty limited, and there was some kind of shower built-in, but it was so incredibly tiny, and your water capacity is quite small. So actually, like, taking a shower is not comparable to taking a normal shower. So yes, we had the ability to kind of rinse off at the end of the day. Sometimes we also would only camp off grid. So I think we hooked up like twice during the whole trip in like very bad conditions. We needed power. So we did have solar panels on the roof. And we were able to, just with our water tank and the solar, to sustain ourselves. But that does mean you cannot use any of that, for a long time.
Right. So did you hang on to the van when you were done with the trip? Do you still get out in the van every now and then?
We didn't. We kept it for about a year, and then we realized that we were still living in the city at the time in Denver, and we realized, like, if we did this every day, being in nature, why wouldn't we just move a place where we can do the same thing just without the van? Because we have jobs, and we do need a proper house. So we moved into the mountains, and that was our solution. But we also realized that having a van, a two-wheel drive van where we live, is not a great solution. We wouldn't take it out as much anymore, and we decided to sell it.
Yeah, well, that makes sense then. So I'm curious, when you were on your motorcycle trip, and now we'll segue into your area of particular expertise. When you were on your motorcycle trip off in, camping here, camping there, doing the things that you were doing, what did you do for coffee?
Yeah, so there's a lot of solutions out there in the coffee world that you can take on the road. What I see a lot is that people don't realize that there's actually some pretty good solutions to drink good coffee when you're out camping or in the backcountry. I think a lot of people automatically go to instant, which isn't the best solution. It's very convenient, but it does not create a great cup of coffee in general. But it gets the job done to kind of wake up in the morning. And I think a lot of people, see that as the only option. I have a little kind of foldable pour over device that I really like. You do need to bring filters for it, but it just takes standard little filters. And think about a normal pour over where you bring your ground coffee and you put the device on your coffee cup and you just boil some water, and that's all you need. You don't need a very strict recipe. You can if you want to be really precise about it, but that's usually not needed when you're camping. But you can bring fairly fresh coffee, ground or grind it up there if you want to bring a little hand grinder. And that was my solution for the mornings, and used to make 1 or 2 cups in the morning and be usually set for the rest of the day.
Yeah. So what was it that, and now I can tell everybody that René is one of the people behind a company called Bivouac Coffee out in Colorado, obviously where he lives. And that's one of the reasons why we're talking to him. I interviewed a guy who makes beer at a commercial level, not just, some dude with a small production in his basement. This is somebody who comes up with, beer that gets sold commercially to you can buy it almost anywhere kind of thing. So how does having an enjoyment for coffee turn into creating a coffee company?
Yeah, it got created it got started in an interesting way. My business partner at the time, Kyle, he did a trip to South America and was always interested in coffee and drank a lot of coffee there and asked basically, why does this coffee taste so much better? And a lot of people, I think, logically think, oh, because you're closer to the source, because they grow coffee there, which isn't related. And what he discovered was that most coffee that you get in Central America and Africa is sun-dried coffee. So he told me this story when he came back, and he's like, oh, these naturals, as they call them, or sun-dried coffees, they're so good. And I looked into it from a environmental perspective, and the impact on the environment is a lot smaller than most coffees that you buy in the US. And I thought it was fascinating because I always was pretty passionate about coffee, but I was definitely not an expert. And as we started building out this little company, we thought about just only doing naturals and this thing, like, let's make a stance here and only import and roast naturally processed coffees. And because they have a number of benefits. So asked me to, kind of start supporting, ultimately, taking over the company and build it out further. And a big part of what we do is educating people on where coffee comes from, because most people are unaware the differences between washed coffee or naturally processed coffee, and there are some other versions, the environmental impact of coffee in general. And that's what we started, and that's what we're still doing today. I think as far as I'm aware, we are the only company that only imports and roasts and sells naturals. You can definitely find them in other roasters, but we're trying to educate people on the environmental impacts and the fact that it tastes really good too.
Yeah. See, I know I'm not a coffee drinker. I know absolutely nothing about coffee. My experience with coffee was it tastes terrible and it makes you have to poop. And that was it, and I had that kind of burned into me as a young man, and I never went back to it.
Well, the good news is there's hope. We've converted quite a few tea drinkers that come to us when we sample coffees and say, I hate coffee. And then we have them tried and they say, actually, this is very good. So there's a chance, Wes. We'll get you.
Well, we'll have to see. And actually, you and I are going to have the opportunity, and we may be able to see in person, because one of the things that you're doing this year is you're partnering with the BMW MOA for a few events over the course of the year. So let's talk a little bit about that. I'm curious how that came to be. How did you get hooked up with the MOA?
Yeah, we have been pretty active in the kind of adventure travel space for a couple years. And then with my passion for motorcycle travel, I was always attracted to some of the brands that operate in that space. So know quite a few people, and I got introduced to the BMW MOA a couple months ago, and just started chatting about a way to do some activations together. We're pretty big on partnerships. We really like using our partners to kind of get the word out and go to events together and have people just try the coffee and share our story. That's really what we're trying to do. And the best way to do it is to work on the market kind of together as partners, where we have that association of brands. Yeah. And I think, with the membership program that the BMW MOA has, and the type of riders, and I think the interest there is pretty big. So we started looking at the calendar and thinking if there's some events this year that we can do together. And one of them will be the Overland Expo in Flagstaff, Arizona.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's Overland Expo West. And I'm trying to remember the date, and it is escaping me. I know it's in May.
Yeah, it's.
Do you happen to remember?
I can tell you. Pretty sure it's
May 20th through the 22nd. So it's that's
right.
It's the next to last weekend in May, and that's it's going to be at Fort Tuthill County Park in Flagstaff, Arizona, which is just an absolutely beautiful town. Have you ever been to Flagstaff?
I have. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's what I remember about Flagstaff at the time. The last time I was there was maybe 2001, And I remember my friend Jason and I were riding across the country. And we had been in Arizona for a couple of days, and it was just so hot. It was hot. There was one place we stopped for gas and to drench ourselves in water. We were, instead of, how you stop at a truck stop or something, and you buy a little 20-ounce bottle of water or something, and we were buying gallons of water and drinking all that we could hold and dumping the rest in our helmets and over our heads and all that. And I remember one day we're at this gas station, and I looked up and they had a thermometer in the shade, and it was 106 degrees in the shade in Arizona. And that night we were in Flagstaff, and this is, the middle of July, and we were chilly. We had to wear our jackets because Flagstaff, and that's kind of when I first figured out the whole concept of elevation. It makes a huge difference because Flagstaff is quite at a high elevation. So it's the climate there, even in the middle of summer, is just so wonderful. I can't wait to go back.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Flagstaff is a great place. There's great riding around. There's a lot of there's a couple canyons and great roads directly outside of Flagstaff. So I think that's really nice. Also with the Overland Expo, it's at a county park, so it has some facilities. It's all in the trees. So if you camp there for a couple of days, which I would highly recommend, you set up your tent, in the trees, in the shade, and there's the moto camping area is really fun. A lot of people travel in on their bikes. And stay there for the whole weekend and hang out together and share stories and gear and all kinds of inventions they find at the Overland Expo, because obviously there's a whole vendor side to the Overland Expo, where you can find a lot of products also for the motorcycle industry. And it's a fun experience. I highly recommend people that are have the ability to go that weekend to join. We will be serving free coffee every morning at the moto camping area, so just for the moto campers. So we will be camping there with our little team and, hopefully meet some new riders.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to it because the MOA is I don't want to say that we're going to be running the moto camping area, but we're definitely going to be helping to, make it better for everybody who, comes out. And MOA members that want to attend any of the Overland Expo events in 2022 will actually be able to get their tickets at a discounted rate through their MOA membership. And we'll have that information out to people through the newsletters and things like that. Now, don't give out the code, but we've also worked out a partnership with Bivouac Coffee, René's company, for a discount for MOA members. So make sure those of you who are MOA members and listening, that you pay attention to your newsletter that you get a couple of times a month so that you can get a little bit more information about that and the discount code. And if you're listening and you're not an MOA member, now is a great time to join because now one of the things you get for your membership fee is a good discount on some really fantastic coffee. If you needed any other, it's cheaper than a Sam's Club or BJ's membership by far. So, and then you get to rub elbows with motorcycle riders at the same time, which is fantastic. So you're going to be coming to Overland Expo West. Have you worked out with us what other events you might be coming to?
Yeah, we're actually also going to be at the big rally in Springfield, Missouri. I think it's in June, the middle of June.
It is fantastic. So,
yeah, that's the big one I've heard. I'm pretty new to the BMW MOA space too, so I'm excited to go. And I think this is one of your biggest rallies, right? So this is going to be exciting.
Yeah, it's our 50th anniversary this year in 2022. And it's because of the pandemic, it's not our 50th rally. It would have been, except for the one that we had to cancel when everything was locked down back in 2020. But it's still our 50th anniversary, and we're expecting a really, really good turnout. So this is a great year. This year and next year are going to be great years to come to the rally, because it's just going to be a mess of people. I don't know if that's a phrase that you grew up with. But where I live, kind of in the northern reaches of the South in the U.S., a mess of something is almost always a good thing, because we don't really say a mess of something bad. We have different words that we use for that. So a mess of is typically good. And so having a mess of people at your event is really fantastic. So obviously you're going to be needing to make more than 1 or 2 cups of coffee at a time. So I'll be interested to see your setup, because I'm really interested in just kind of any kind of devices. I'm not much of a camper is what it comes down to. And when I was much younger, and I could get by with a lot less. I didn't need necessarily a ground pad or anything like that. I was happy just sleeping next to my motorcycle, and things like that. So I'm not that sturdy anymore. So I need a little bit more around me.
Yeah.
But I'm always interested in how people set up themselves on a motorcycle trip to be able to cook and have coffee and do all the things that I kind of take for granted on a trip, because I might I usually have my thing that I like to do is to have pitas and peanut butter, because then I can have, at least I can get by. I can skip a regular meal if I want to, get some water or a little bit of juice for a good breakfast, and just have, peanut butter and pita. It's a little dry and chewy, but it works out pretty well. And you don't have to worry, like regular bread will get all smashed in your saddlebag, but a pita is already flat. So
yeah, that's a really good idea. That's something we should try. That's a new one to me.
There you go. So let me ask you a couple of questions about coffee, because I'm curious. Like I said, I'm not really a coffee drinker myself. So how do you make coffee, right? Because coffee, I know everybody says coffee bean, but my understanding is it's not a bean, it's a seed.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. So the process is basically, it grows on a tree, and it's a fruit, right, with a seed inside. And with these naturally processed coffees that we source, you get very high quality coffee because they are dried in the sun for a couple of weeks. So it ferments a little bit longer in that fruit. So it gets naturally sweet and not acidic. So it's the opposite of very bitter, dark coffee. And there's definitely people that love very dark and bitter coffee. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just we specialize in a little bit lighter, a little bit more smooth, non-acidic coffees that are easy on your stomach as well, which is another benefit because it means you don't have to find a bathroom an hour after you drink that cup of coffee. So it's one of the reasons we're pretty active in the outdoor space and the adventure space, because we have some athletes that use our coffee for that reason, because one, it tastes really good, but two, it's much easier on their stomach.
Gotcha.
So if you go for a 10-mile run, it's the last thing you want. And a lot of people avoid coffee for that reason if they do, a long day out, even sometimes camping or riding a bike.
Yeah.
So, that's a big part of it. And then, so that's the processing stage. And then when that bean is dried, it's basically ready for export. And then it's up to the roaster. So that's everything we do here in a small mountain town called Evergreen here in Colorado. We have our roasting facility, and then we take that coffee and we roast it, depend on the flavor profile that we want to get out of the bean that fits that specific coffee. And that could be a little lighter, it could be a little darker. We have all kinds of options out there and a couple blends that we've created as well. So some work better as espresso or just a pour over. And then you get to the actual brewing, which is the fun part for a lot of people, trying to figure out what is your favorite way to make that cup of coffee. And there's different ways you can do that. Just a drip coffee maker is totally fine. That's what I use at home. I find it very easy in the morning I have a high quality one, but it's nothing extremely expensive. Pour overs are fun because you can make 1 cup at a time. So you basically do the same, you have the same process of brewing. You just do it by hand. You just pour water over the grounds.
Okay.
And then there's things like the AeroPress that is getting pretty popular. And so there's different ways. And to be honest, you can't really go wrong with any way. It's a very personal choice. What we are trying to educate people on is that if you buy good beans that you like, and you think a little bit about the environment in your while you're kind of in that purchasing process, because it is impactful on the world of coffee. And then you find your way to make it right, your recipe. Usually, there's tons of recipes to find online. The ratio between water and how much coffee you use and things like that, and the time you let it sit in like an AeroPress or a French press. There's all kinds of recipes. Start somewhere and see what you like, but it doesn't need to be super scientific. And we will be bringing some kind of fun, like foldable, very portable brewing solutions to especially the rally in Missouri. We'll have those for sale. So we'll have some fun specials for people attending the rally, and
cool.
Hopefully get them on their bike with a slightly better setup than Instant.
Yeah, that's awesome. So do you have something I've always been curious about, because my wife is very sensitive to caffeine. So she only drinks, and on rare occasions, she only drinks decaffeinated coffee. How does that happen? Because the caffeine, at least what I think is, the caffeine is natural. It's not like a Coke or a Pepsi where it's added in the creation process. So do you guys even bother with that? Because it's got to add a lot of steps to the process.
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually don't. There are some naturals that are decaf. It's a pretty complicated process. In general, the type of coffee we source, it's not great to extract the caffeine.
Okay.
So we're trying to kind of stay away from that. We do get the question a fair bit, and unfortunately, the answer is usually no. We don't offer that right now. But for those reasons, it's a pretty complicated process. And like you said it perfectly, it's a natural thing. The only difference that we do see with caffeine is, and I don't have a scientific explanation, but we do see with these naturals that kind of the caffeine effect is a little bit more gentle almost.
Okay.
I used to drink a lot of different brands of coffee, before starting Bivouac. And I see these days, if I drink just 2 cups of coffee in the morning, I'm usually just good for the rest of the day. You don't get super jittery. If you take too much of it, you will, right? If you keep on drinking, absolutely. But just 1 or 2 cups in the morning usually just holds you over for a long time without kind of that caffeine crash. And again, this is not a scientific explanation. It's just kind of our experience that we have and our customers. And it's been quite interesting. So yeah, I would love to get some more feedback from people that are going to try it and see if they have a similar effect.
That's really cool. So on a typical day, what's a good time for you to stop drinking coffee so you can actually get some sleep? Because it's like, I have all these stereotypes in my head, and a lot of them were reinforced by my father as a kid, because he was kind of one of those typical military dudes, from the Vietnam era. He was fueled on coffee and cigarettes. And as soon as he put either one of those things down, he was asleep. So what's a good time for you? And I realize it's going to be different for everybody, but when do you kind of start staying away from coffee to make sure you get a good night's sleep?
I would say usually 2:00 in the afternoon is maybe the perfect time. I sometimes drink a coffee a little bit later than that, but I do it on days where I know I have long work days or commitments at night.
Yeah.
I definitely will not drink coffee, especially our coffee, which, has a pretty high caffeine content, at like 5:00 in the afternoon. That will keep me up. So I try to, most people, and what I hear from a lot of our customers, on the conservative side, I would say noon. We actually close our tasting room in Evergreen, so our cafe, at 3:00 in the afternoon, because we roast usually later in the day or we do meetings. So we actually are not even open at 5:00 in the afternoon because we're so focused on coffee that most people don't really want to drink coffee at 4 or 5 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
So I would say 2:00 is maybe the sweet spot, somewhere between noon and 2 if you're really sensitive to caffeine.
There you go. So before we go, tell me how people can find you guys on the internet. Your website, if you're out there on social media, anything like that.
Yeah, it's pretty easy because we have a pretty unique name, Bivouac Coffee. So that's BIVOUAC, Bivouac. And our web address is bivouac.coffee. And that's also our Instagram handle. And that's probably the best place to follow us.
Cool.
And then we're on Facebook as well. If we do Facebook, and then it's pretty easy to find us online because of the name.
Yeah. And I didn't realize until just now that there was a top level domain .coffee. So that's pretty cool.
There is. Yep. Yeah. And if anybody has any questions, we do. And if somebody's local in Colorado, we offer classes as well. So if somebody's local and wants to do one of our tasting experience or brewing classes, we offer those on quite a few Saturdays throughout the year. Here in the mountains, great place to visit in general. So we do that, and that's all on our website as well.
Fantastic. René, thank you very much for joining us here to talk about Bivouac and your experiences with motorcycles and living the van life there for that year that you and your wife were on the road in the United States. Man, that was really, really cool to hear about.
Yeah, thank you so much, Wes. I can't wait for us to share some coffee at the Overland Expo. We're going to have to make sure you try it.
I promise I will try. I really will. I'm looking forward to it.
Sounds great. Can't wait.
All right, man. See you then.
All right. See you on the road. Thanks.
Chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you're already a member of the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America. Thank you for your membership and your ongoing support. If you're listening and you're not a member, I'd like to encourage you to join. Become a digital member for just $39 a year and support not only 200 Miles Before Breakfast, but our other podcasts as well, Chasing the Horizon, and the MOA's YouTube channel, which features tech and how-to videos, product unboxing, reviews, and other fun videos, including a tasty recipe or two. Membership in the MOA also gets you a ton of discounts and reduced cost access to programs like the Platinum Roadside Assistance Plan. You can find out all about the MOA by pointing your web browser to bmwmoa.org and participate with us, even if you're not a member, by finding us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you for listening to 200 Miles Before Breakfast, the podcast by, for, and about the members of the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America. Ride smart out there, and let's meet up for breakfast at your favorite diner real soon.